I didn't. I didn't prepare any awful, heinous jokes or anything this time.
Oh,
I got one.
oh, good. Right. Good. I was worried for a minute.
Yeah.
Was worried we'd escape unscathed.
All right, you ready?
Yeah, go on.
All right. So the other day I tried to win a pun contest, and I had 10 entries. I sent in 10 different puns, and I figured at least one of them would work, but no pun intended.
Oh. Jesus Christ.
I love how that's exactly my type of joke, but that's the opposite of what David likes.
I like felt that in my stomach. Like
Yeah. That's terrible bad.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. God damn.
So welcome to whatever this podcast is called.
Yeah. What's up, Basil?
Mando Lauren. Mando againians. Mando each weekends.
We'll get there.
Yeah. So I know I was talking about this before David had even watched the episode, so then I had to shut up. But I love this episode so much. Like the exploring of old ruins is like my jam, and I want an entire like series that's nothing but exploring like old alien ruins because that's just so cool to me.
Yeah, I guess let's start with like the high level. What did you think, David?
Well, what did you think first?
Okay, well, I think we already know what Darth thinks. I really liked this one a lot more. This one held my attention a lot more than the first episode did. There were a lot of little things, a lot of little details, and a lot of little plot devices going on that I really liked. And then there were some big things, in more ways than one, that happened and were visualized that were also very, very cool. So overall, like from start to finish, I really like this one a lot better than the previous episode.
It's interesting. So, I had a good time. I too also thought really interesting to go and visit this area. I thought a lot of the little things happening were really interesting. Again, I was also more engaged. Structurally, this episode is. I have no idea what they were trying to achieve with the structure of this episode.
Yeah, the pacing did feel weird.
Yeah, and I have
How
some
do you
theories
mean?
about sort of. Well, I mean, like, there's a triple beat for the same reveal. Like, we'll get into it, but like, there's just little things that they did where there was some very unmotivated action and when I say action, I don't mean like literal action, but like unmotivated decisions that they made in how they chose to cut this together, that resulted in like the same, like for example, they go into the cave and you get the reveal 3 separate times, and it's entirely unnecessary. Like it's just weird. Like it's just odd.
Hey, they spent a lot on that background shot.
Yeah, clearly. But no, I had a good time. I just thought it was a bit clunky. Structurally, which I guess we'll kind of work through. But I mean, the first thing I've written down, I was very excited, is I've written down in all caps in my notes app, pod racing, Boonta Eve. So I was very excited. When I saw the pod racing, I was like, yes, let's go. I would pay stupid money to see Mando doing a big pod race. Get him in a pod race or do a big pod race.
Well, it wasn't pod
Season
racing,
finale.
right? It was just what do you call it? Speeders?
Yeah, I think it was more just like drag racing illegally on the streets, but it's okay because it's Boonta Eve and everyone does weird stuff.
Yeah. Either way,
I agree
was
with
just
you.
excited
Yeah,
to see.
I mean, either way, I want more pod racing because I mean, it's cool.
It's the best part of that film, aside from the politics. Like,
And Darth Maul.
oh my god, Darth Maul.
So, speaking of Boonta Eve, that was the thing that I really liked about the beginning of this episode. It was just it felt a little bit like kind of like a throwaway line, but it was also a bit of world building that I really enjoyed because just by you start with a shot of the street race and then she's complaining about having to, well, I got to charge you extra because I'm working on Boonta Eve. And then with Mando, like, how they get on Boonta Eve, and she makes like a little drinking sign, and then he takes off into the fireworks. And those are lots of like little things that allow you to extrapolate so much about the world. And like one of the big things that we've talked about a bunch is the verisimilitude and making a place feel lived in, and just the idea that Tatooine is not a static place that Mando shows up in to get side quests every now and then. That like there's life happening and there's stuff happening, and it's not the same place all the time, and all of that is just inferred by this, by a couple shots and the comment about Boonta Eve.
Yeah.
And I've been trying all day. I'm hoping that y'all can help me with this. I've been trying all day to think of like an adequate term to describe that, because it seems like a little thing. But I haven't been able to come up with the term for like just that little something extra, a little extra spice.
Because it's not actual world building. It's just a little extra filling that makes the world feel more real.
Yeah, because you're not going George Martin on this and like spending 10 minutes explaining like all the different cultural history of like Boonta Eve and like all the different traditions and what you're supposed to wear and what you drink and what you eat and why we do it and stuff like that. But all of that can be inferred by just those little things happening.
Yeah, I mean, at a craft level, there's a few different kind of pieces of terminology you could use to describe it. I think they're all kind of like interchangeable in some sense, but you would talk about this kind of thing as it's not necessarily world building, but there's a decision that you make in storytelling about detail, and detail can be motivated by character. So it can reveal something about the nature of a character or their philosophy or something like that, or even like literally a detail, right? Like, what are they wearing for a particular activity? What have they chosen to wear for that particular activity? If you have a character in a story who's moving house and they've worn very practical athletic wear versus someone who's moving house and they haven't worn practical athletic wear, that tells you something about that character and the way that they approach the situation and the world they're in. And then you have like extraneous detail, which is detail about the world, which is what George Martin has I would say like obsession is the wrong word, but it's the thing that he loves doing, which is like it's kind of like in Lord of the Rings, the Lord of the Rings book's famous for this, where you meet a character and they're like, I am Barethor, son of Gladwyn, grandson of Carlos, who was cousins to the third king, descended from the crown. And then you get a really, really detailed history of that person and their place in the world. And you can do that with world building stuff as well, where Stephen King is the classic kind of version of doing this, where you'll zip around the town and you'll get all these little details of little people's lives, and individually they don't mean anything, but they come together to create texture. Mm-hmm. And I think what we're talking about here is not necessarily explicitly world building, but it's details in the story that give it texture and make it feel dynamic and let us infer things instead of just telling us, I am Barethor, son of fucking whoever. Like, instead of just telling you, it's showing you little details that you then infer more extraneous world building and dynamism that is possible because it's not reality, right?
And it allows you to build all that yourself.
Yeah, but I think the key there is it has to be a little bit intentional. You can't do it accidentally. Like, obviously shows and films and media is made by lots of people involved, and sometimes things just happen accidentally and someone can read into it. But yeah, I think the key there is they go, how do we communicate in the least amount of words, text, and visuals that this place is changing while Mando isn't here? And that essentialism, I think, is a real stylistic characteristic of Jon Favreau's work. It's something that I strive for in my books as well. But it's not, it's also your taste is going to vary. A friend of mine who she loves fantasy and reads my books, and she's like, man, I just wish you would like lavish us in detail of these places. Like, I just want 10 paragraphs about this village or this particular clothing shop or whatever. And so I think it's also a taste thing of where you land on those kinds of things.
Well, one of the things I was thinking about with them throwing that in there, I was like, is this Is this a lore callback? Is it just a little something extra, or is that relevant to the plot? You know, it's not relevant to the plot yet. It might be later. We don't know, but it isn't currently. And I'm not steeped enough in the lore to tell you whether or not Boonta Eve is an important thing.
Not that I've ever heard.
If you two don't know about it, it cannot be important in Star Wars because
Well,
like
I haven't heard back from my Star Wars friend, so he might have something to say about it.
So there were a couple things, not just the Boonta Eve stuff, that kind of like filled in a little bit more, and I feel like we got I'm blanking on the woman's name that is the mechanic. But we get a little bit more of her character, and I don't know that we saw her be as shady as she was here, where like she literally had the Jawas take apart the guy's speeder so she could sell the pieces back to him of his own speeder, which was hilarious and I loved it. But I was also like, I kind of thought she was one of the good guys. So are they like changing her character, or did I just have the wrong perception of her the whole time? Or
I would say you had the wrong perception of her. Like this seemed completely in character for me because you remember
she was going to sell Grogu the first time.
Yeah,
Like,
and then what was the
that's their
other?
introduction.
What was the other thing of like? She's like, yeah, you know, you take my friend. I've known her forever, and like, you know, you just need to take her to the next system, or whatever. And it's like, I thought you knew her forever. I'm like, it's 5 minutes, you know, whatever.
Yeah, she's like just trying to make some credits.
Yeah.
I think because she's friendly, that's an easy mistake to make. Like she's very lighthearted and jovial, but like she's a huckster. Like she's a fucking grifter. Which I mean, okay, so she sells him the world's most anxious astromech droid, which is extremely funny to me. We were talking last week. I can't remember if we actually talked about it last week or if we were texting about it. I think we might have been on the live stream, about like whether or not droids, like, do they follow orders? Do they have autonomy? And now I'm like, was that us or was that me at the pub?
no, that was on here because I was like, why does he need a droid he could trust? Because droids just do what you tell them.
Which is like, but then they have personality, so I guess they don't.
Yeah, it goes back and forth because not all of them do. There's plenty of droids I think that we've seen that they just pour you a beer or whatever, you know?
Right. It's kind of like the Mickey Mouse Pluto problem, right? It's like if they're wearing clothes, they're a person. Otherwise, they're just a fucking dog. Like what? Or like worse is Mickey keeping like a differently able person as a pet. Like there's a lot of stuff to unpack there, but you know what? So you guys are more Star Wars brain people than I am. I found the plot very confusing with the astromech. So clarify for me because I got very lost in the like back and forth. So he needs the astromech droid to navigate, or like what does the astromech droid do for him? Because later Bo Katan says that Grogu is a good navigator because Mando won't shut up about how being a Mandalorian you need to be a good navigator. But then why does he need the astromech droid? Like what is that doing for is that like a co-pilot? Like I just wasn't clear on what he needed it for.
Are you asking in regards to the plot, or are you asking like in the in world, like what's the what does Mando need from him?
Yeah,
because like they're two separate things there, I think.
I guess in this episode I'm interested in why Mando needs him.
So as far as I could tell, the only reason that he did not need specifically an astromech, because remember, like initially he wanted IG-11, which begs the question of where would IG-11 have fit in the ship. And I think as far as I could tell, like all he needed him for was just to test an air sample.
Oh, because he sends him out of the ship and then he goes behind the rocks and then he gets got. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
But like as far as the plot goes, like he's an astromech, therefore he can fly the ship, which is what Grogu needs to get to Bo Katan, or to give him the credibility to get to Bo Katan.
Which I don't know if you actually answered. Like it was kind of two questions as to like what does the astromech droid actually do, versus why did he need a droid in the first place?
Yeah. So we now know why he needed a droid, but what does it do?
So typically, they talked about it a lot more in the OT, in the original trilogy, about all the calculations they have to do to actually go to hyperspace, and like flying in space takes a lot of math, and that's what the droid is for. It is to help you navigate, and so you don't have to think about all of this different stuff. And then they also show the droid like fixing things very frequently. You see like R2 like spin around in the cockpit and fix stuff, and which I don't know how much sense that makes, but still, I guess the engine is there in his compartment with him, so he could do solders and things if he's if that's needed.
But he doesn't. But Mando doesn't need him for any of that flying stuff. Because remember, like he wanted IG-11. He didn't want an asteroid.
It was just to test the toxicity of the air and everything, and more specifically, he wasn't talking about the surface when he initially talked about it. He was initially talking about he literally wanted a spelunking droid, and he wanted to send him way down under, which he kind of like completely changed his tune as soon as he found out that the upper atmosphere was, the ground level was fine, there was no radiation or whatever, and it was breathable. He no longer cared about testing the air quality in the mines, which was what he wanted the original droid for, was to test the mines. So that was kind of like I don't know if that's a logical change.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense to me. I just thought it was convenient that the droid allowed Grogu to fly back to Bo Katan. It's also really hard to say in my accent because I would say Bo Katan, but they keep saying Bo Katan, and it's making my head ache. Bo Katan. Yeah, I kind of found it like, contrived is maybe a too mean of a way of saying it, but
also I don't think what you just said is true. I don't think that the droid navigated him back. I think the entire point was that Grogu learned enough about navigation that Grogu navigated himself to Bo Katan. I think that was supposed to be the inference we were getting.
Yeah, but the droid flies the ship.
The droid flies the ship and what he navigates?
I guess.
But then Bo Katan says, well, we can find Mando again because we have the flight navigation data from the droid. Yeah. So maybe he is navigating. I don't know.
Either way, like long story short, the droid being there allows Grogu to get to Bo Katan and back.
Yes.
But there's also a line where she says, you must be a really skilled navigator to make it here. She says that to Grogu, not to the droid.
Yes. Which, okay, so let's assume that the droid is flying, but he's navigating. That kind of makes sense to me.
Did the droid even make it into the cockpit at that point?
No, he doesn't need to be in the cockpit. He can fly from the back.
No, I mean, sorry, into the plane, or did he get left in the mine?
No, he was in the ship.
He was?
He went back to the ship when they went down.
Okay.
Because Mando was like, wait here or whatever. I have a really stupid question because maybe I've just forgotten. Is the Darksaber really heavy?
That was something that they talked about in Mando season 2.5, which if you hadn't seen it, you might have missed that detail, where he's training with the armorer, and he's like, it's really heavy, and she's like, that's because you're not doing it right.
It's like the enchanted sword thing, where if you don't have the proper spirit, you can't wield it. It becomes too heavy for a mortal to lift. That kind of, Thor's hammer type thing.
Not. It's not like a Thor's hammer thing.
But
it's like he's not using it the right way,
or
he's not embracing it the right way, or something like that.
I think it was something like you have to like know who you are and know what you want, and then the sword will latch onto that or something like that. And so that's why she can flawlessly use it, because she's very confident in who she is and what she wants with her life, and Mando has no idea what he wants. So it's Thor's hammer to him.
Okay, that makes sense. And like, he goes through that sequence of killing those dudes, and it's just like the clumsiest kind of, like, it's a really cool little piece of action choreography where he just sort of like clumsily butchers these guys. Because I think we're so used to seeing Mando just like in a combat scenario just clean up. Like, this dude is like, his martial skills are through the roof. And watching him just like completely just like curmudgeonly kill these guys, I thought was really really a cool little moment.
I could just see David like yelling at the screen, like, "What's wrong with you? It's not that heavy. It's made of light."
I've written literally in my notes here. As I was watching this, I have my notes app open. I've written, the Darksaber is heavy. Did I forget this? So I did forget this. Another question I had just before we get there is where they land. I mean, like, I noticed where they land before they go down into the mine had some of the most dynamic lighting we've seen in the show so far, and I think for that reason it felt like one of the most real sets. I know a lot of the online discourse about Mando has been that it looks flat and fake because of the volume, but I really felt like that was one of the first times that little spot where they land. You know, Amanda's walking, he's splashing in water. Like, it just really felt like a real place. And so too did the tomb at you know, where they end the episode. What did y'all think of, like, I guess, like, this season compared to the previous seasons and some of that criticism? Like, you guys feeling like it's better? Has that even bothered you at all? Like, where are you guys at with that?
No, from a like, normally I'm like really looking hard at the cinematography, and nothing is like super stood out to me. But if all they're talking about is like maybe the depth of field in certain places looked wrong, maybe that would jump out more to certain people than others. I don't know. Do you notice anything, Rye?
Nah, it hasn't bothered me at all. I guess I just haven't been looking that closely at it. I'm caught up in the story, man.
Yeah. So
just give the big space cowboy.
We've been skipping around a lot. So one thing that I thought was really cool, because it was a complaint that I had last episode, was not really understanding the geography of where they were going and stuff. And this time, when they're flying towards Mandalore, he's like literally pointing out the window, and he's going, "That moon is this, and I grew up on that moon over there." And I was like, okay.
Bo Katan's over there. That's gonna be important.
I was like, okay, this is what they needed to do this on a 5-year-old level, and now I know where I am. And I felt so grounded in that explanation, you know? And I was like, I don't know if it wasn't presented this way before, or if I'm just on a lower level and I needed that, point of fact.
You need the video game map screen to pop up.
Pretty much, yeah.
This is where Mando is going.
Yeah, let me hit tab and zoom out. Yeah.
Gonna press the touch thing on my PlayStation controller.
What I was gonna say is that so, like, you know, the other big thing that I have is like the credibility and the credibility aspect of a character being able to do something. And in the first episode, and when Mando's like, "Oh, you do this, and this is how you navigate, and this is how you fly, and stuff like that. You got to learn all this stuff to be a good Mandalorian." And then we get to this episode, and he continues to do that, and is like, "Oh, and we're going down there, and you should go, like, Bo Katan's over here, and I grew up over there, and blah blah blah." And not only does that give, you know, like Darth said, give us or ground us in the geography of where we are, but it also establishes that credibility for Grogu with the help of the astromech to be able to do the things that he does. Because I was thinking, like, when he's like, we're jumping ahead again, but like, or I'm jumping ahead again, but like when he's like, "You need to go get Bo Katan," and I'm like, well, how's he gonna? Oh, right, okay, so it works. And so, like, those are the little things of like moving the puzzle pieces together to make the story flow that I appreciate.
Yeah, and something else that was kind of they forecasted ahead of time was, as soon as they land on the planet, or while they're going down, and he's like, "No communication could come out of here. We're totally on our own." So it's not like, "Grogu, go get Bo Katan." That didn't come out of nowhere. You know, it was set up ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess my issue with it is not like all the pieces are in place, and I think it's credible. I just thought it was a really odd structural choice. Like, I don't know.
It is, because like, my question was, does anything actually change if they are both captured and they call for her and she gets the telephone call and she's like, "Okay, I'll come help you"? The only thing that it changes is it shows that Grogu can navigate like a Mandalorian. So
I disagree. Because this occurred to me while I was watching either before or after, I don't remember. But anyway, she is not happy with Mando at all, and that's established in the first episode. And then this one, when they're like, "Oh, there's an unannounced visitor coming," and she's like, "All right, let's go finish this guy." And so she is not a Mando fan. So I think in a situation where Mando would be like, "Help, I'm captured by something from Doctor Who," And if that happens, maybe she doesn't come. But because it's just Grogu, she's like immediately switches from like I'm gonna kill Mando to what happened, you know?
Yeah, well, and now it's a child asking for help, and you might be fine with killing the dad, but when the kid is there saying, "Please help save my dad," that's kind of a different tone, you know?
Yeah.
It also sets up the next episode in a really interesting way where she's his ride-off planet now, right? Because his ship is on her moon, and
True.
you know,
Yeah.
and so there's because I read it as her going, what happened? I can't have him losing the Darksaber to some fucking idiot monster. You know, she has a vested interest in not in him, but in his capacity to supplant her on the throne. And so I think there's like, yes, she's like, I'm going to help this kid, but I think there's also this like self-interest angle of, you know, she kind of like, unless she kills him, she kind of needs to keep tabs on this dude in case he decides that he wants to take over Mandalore.
Well, what you just said is a big problem that I have with how they played this out was that she had what she wanted. She was holding the Darksaber. He was tied up. She could have just stabbed him, killed him, had the sword, won it in battle, if you want to call it this. She fought something to get the sword. She wanted it that badly. She was about to go kill him anyway. You know, it just
Well,
didn't...
I think that's the that is the show don't tell of she doesn't want it that badly. She wants it. She doesn't want it that badly.
Yeah, because we see her save his life twice in this episode, right?
Yeah, or maybe she's not willing to cross a certain line in order to get it back.
Yeah, well, she even name drops Satine in this episode, and Satine is like famously a pacifist, right? So like, there's an element of, yeah, I think it's like, Darth, you're right. She could skewer him, but even she is not willing to compromise herself. She's not willing to damn herself in that way, right? We talk a lot about this. You know, a fate worse than death is what the character would have to endure in order to achieve that desire. In order to get what she wants, she would have to damn herself. And so instead, she needs to work out what she needs, and I think that will be her arc this season, right?
Yeah, I think all that I'm arguing is that, like, as a writer, it looks like they missed it, as opposed to them having the scene where she's like, "Do I kill him? No, I don't want to be that person." Instead, we have to imagine it went through her head, and we don't even see her pause. You know, she's just like, "I killed him. I rescued him. That's it. I never even thought about it."
Well, I don't remember now, but like, how does the Darksaber end up in a position where Mando can? Because he conspicuously picks it up and puts it away, right?
So,
that is not not an accident. But
no, so the sequencing is, so he's knocked out in the hammock thing, or sorry, the creature comes in. We'll talk about the creature in a second, because what the fuck is happening in Star Wars? She kills it. And he's knocked out, and he wakes up lying next to a campfire, and she has all of his gear laid out. And when he wakes up, it's the first thing he does is he conspicuously puts it in his belt as he gets up.
All right, so I think the interesting thing there is what Darth is talking about, that she puts it back at all, and then maybe that's because she's still in a position of that, you know, or she's still in the position of she needs to earn it back, as opposed to just, you know, there it is and I'm going to take it. Like that doesn't work in order to regain it, because you know, you have the whole thing at the end of season 2 where he's like, you know, here, take it, whatever, I don't care, you know, we don't have to fight, I yield. And Moff Gideon's like, no, it doesn't work like that, and she's like, no, it doesn't work like that too, you know. So that might be the situation of, or why she just puts it there, even though that is the thing. I mean, you know, the want versus need, but like, that's what she wants. She wants that thing, but she can't have it.
Yeah. I would love to see like long lingering glances of her looking at it, like wanting it, showing the camera, I want that, but I'm not going to take it. You know, having those little extra bits would have sold it, even if they're only a couple seconds long. You know.
I think one of the challenges they have with this scenario is I think it risks melodrama in doting on that too much, because it's already a MacGuffin for the season, right? And I think the challenge they have with a character like Bo Katan is the second that she does stuff like that, they risk losing some of the interiority that I think they're really trying to get at, which is like, you don't really know why she's doing this stuff. And you kind of, like Mando, have to kind of guess around the edges of her motivation. And I agree. I think it can come across as, like, to be honest, kind of confusing. But I also wonder to what extent, you should never deliberately confuse your audience. What I mean is, like, they're deliberately obscuring her motives in a way that is kind of like, if you want to get really wanky about it, which I always do, right? Mando never takes off his helmet. He is always physically obscured, but we understand his interior motivation this season. Bo Katan will take off her helmet, is physically exposed, but we do not know her interiority, right? There's something they're doing there with the foils of these two characters, which, you know. But I agree. I mean, I don't know whether I would... I think that would make it certainly a very different episode. I don't know if it would be good or bad, but I think it would change what they're going for. I do agree, though, that this episode could have used a few more, like, just like slower little moments. It was very, I don't know. It kind of ran at quite a clip despite its length, I thought, which was interesting.
Yeah, I would have loved to see more time spent just walking around the ruins. And what it totally reminded me of was the Vault of Glass in Destiny. I spent so much time wandering around that raid just because I loved how cool all the ruins were. Like, I didn't even care about finding Antheon and actually fighting anything. I just wanted to walk around and explore. And that's exactly what this whole underground, world felt like to me.
That's sort of where the video game analogy, I think, comes back. Like, I think about, the summer that I spent in university just, like, smoking pot and playing Fallout 3. And, like, I didn't care about the story because it's terrible. But I just, like, walked around this world, and you just kind of, like, you go down into a sewer and you're like, what is all happening down here? And so, there's the super mutants are in this corner, and, these raiders are in... Like, you just kind of, like, get really absorbed in there's something about disrepair that's really interesting to me. And, like, that's the Dark Tower is a big motivating factor in my kind of creative journey, and that's obviously why my books like Dying Fantasy. But yeah, I kind of think that's what I wanted more of. Like, maybe that's what next episode will be. I don't know, but I could have used 10 more scenes of just walking through different corridors and, like, talking about what this place used to be, and this was the old refectory, and this was the armory, and, like, the just, like, a bit more flavor. I think it would have been sick. I completely agree.
What do you think, Ryan?
I will disagree a little bit in that we're way out of order in our discussion of this episode.
Yeah,
but I'm fine with that.
I've put a pin in the droid. We'll come back. The big droid thing. We'll come back.
Yeah, we haven't talked about, like, the Morlocks or anything yet either. But, like, I
was calling them albino Wookiees.
the whatever they are, I forget what she called them, but yeah, I don't know that would necessarily make for, like, good TV, in the sense of that kind of thing is, or the parts that we got of them walking around and Bo-Katan explaining, like, oh, this is, this used to be this and this was that, and the waters of Mandalore or whatever. Like, one of the things that I was thinking about from our previous discussion was, you remember how I said that, like, I thought Mando should be stretched,
like,
right? Or not, the plot should be stretched, or it would be better if the plot were stretched out, and how, like, the first season should have been, or that episodes 1 to 3 of the first season should have been stretched to make the whole season. So I don't know. I was thinking about, like, well, this is different than that, and I think it kind of works pretty well, because, like, in the first episode of this season, I think you recall that one of the complaints that I had was that, like, we already knew what we were doing. We already had the quest, and, like, that we weren't starting from the status quo. We're starting in, he's already on the journey of, like, I've got to go walk through the waters of the living waters of Mandalore, etc. And then we get to this episode, and he goes and does it. And so I'm sitting there at the end of the episode thinking like, okay, that's not what we were doing here. Like
Yeah.
he's already done the thing in episode 2, and I'm much more interested because that's not what we're doing. And the tying this back to the walking around and discussing what's going on, or like what this is and what that is and what that was, etc., is that when she's explaining all this stuff to him, because he doesn't know anything about anything, and she's like, this was a this and this was a that, and I came down here as a child and everything, and she's like jaded and over it, and she like doesn't believe, and he is 100% there for it. Like, I've got to go walk to the living, or we got to go bathe in the living waters of Mandalore. And she's like, oh yeah, and there's a mythosaur down there, and so like, and she's just over it, and she's like, you got to get the full experience, and she like reads from the plaque, and then he goes in the water, and you see the mythosaur, and she takes him out of the water, and she's like, what the fuck, and so. I was thinking about that. I was like, I'm way more interested because like there's a journey that she has to go on now where like he's a true believer and she's not anymore.
Yes. Yeah. It's such an interesting maneuver. Hang on. Let's just take a step back because I want to talk about. So, Mando gets capped. So, okay, yeah, we should talk about the Morlocks, I guess. So Mando comes into the mines or whatever, because the droid has gone missing, and as we said before, kind of butchers these fucking Morlock looking ass weird fucking. They're just like, I guess this is just like they're goblins or whatever. Like this is just like Star Wars goblins. It's random mobs in the dungeon is what it is, and he kills them. And they go further down. They jetpack down because they can do that. Him and Grogu, and they go down and they come upon like I don't even know how to describe.
It's a helmet, right?
Yeah, it's the helmet. So it's such a cool looking shot. I was so impressed with the cinematography at this moment where they're in this like dark kind of ash filled part of the dungeon, and he's got the headlamp of his visor or whatever. And he's looking down, and all you're seeing is this big pile of white ash and something reflecting his lamp. And it kind of looks like glass, and then he picks it up, and it's a Mandalorian helmet. And then, just a big robot spider comes out of the ash and grapples with him and captures him. But like that shot's absolutely stunning. The where he's looking at the helmet, because it takes a minute for you to be like, what is that? So good.
And they play the like a really soft rendition of the Mando theme song when he's looking at the helmet, and it's just like this somber moment, and then
haunting.
Yeah, it was really nice.
And you're right. There was like a jump scare. I was like, like when that thing happened. But what was that? Because it was that again. Is that like a deep lore callback? Like, do we know what that thing is?
I was utterly convinced that we were seeing the Yuzong Wong, and I know it didn't look anything like what I'd seen before, but this was Disney's version, and I don't think I'm right. I wish I was, but I don't think I'm right.
I've written here, why was the little weird guy in the big mech? What is happening?
Well, I'm watching this. The very first thing I thought of was like Doctor Who, and I'm like, are there Daleks? Is that a Dalek? There's not Daleks in Star Wars. What the hell is that thing? Because there's something alive in there, right?
Yeah, it's very much a Dalek, where it's just a little tiny little squid brain, and that runs around and operates bigger machinery. And that was the whole.
Yeah, it's a Krykna, apparently, according to this article. Mando and Baby Yoda wandered. I love the article still calling Baby Yoda. Shoutouts. Wandered to this nest while searching for the frog lady, the passenger they've. Oh no, what?
Yeah,
no, this is different.
Yeah,
what?
Hang on.
Krykna is the big spider then.
Yeah, no, that's not what we're talking about at all. I forgot there were more than one spiders in the Mandalorian.
Yeah, that was like the snow planet.
Yeah, never mind. I have no idea what this thing is. The article's unhelpful. It's got like a So you can kill the mech part of it, but you actually have to kill the dude in the helmet, like in the head, to kill it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a weird thing, man. I kind of reminded me of the big goopy tentacle things in I was gonna say the Jedi Awakens, but that's not what it's called. Oh god. The Force Awakens. It's kind of like the big tentacle whippy thingies in the ship, in the freighter or whatever. Like, it just feels like something that isn't from Star Wars. I don't know. I just thought it was really odd,
Especially when it starts like draining his blood, very aggressively.
Well, the only thing that I could think of, again, because it's, I'm not that steeped in the lore, but the only thing I could think of was like, is this like a General Grievous type thing?
I did think that did remind me of that. Yeah.
Yeah, because he had like a stun baton thing too, which all Grievous's guards used.
That's true. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Interesting. Now that just makes me wish that we got like more General Grievous in the films or TV shows, because he's so interesting in the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
It's a mech with zombie rules. I like that.
It's a mech with zombie rules. Yeah. So, okay, yeah. So he gets tied up, and then
the last of Mando.
Got him. So okay, the sequencing here is still a bit muddled in my head, but he gets tied up, and he says to Grogu, "Go get Bo Katan." Grogu goes. Bo Katan, still an absolute baddie. Shout outs. Just lounging on the throne. Has next to her the coolest cape I've ever seen in my life. Doesn't put it on for some reason. Disappointing.
Just lounging around in full armor.
Yeah, now I'm gonna write a fanfic about that. Like, come on, like put it in the show at least. Then, so okay, yeah. So then she goes, kill some Morlocks with the. Did she kill the Morlocks with the Darksaber first and then fight the thing?
No, she doesn't have it then.
Yeah, she doesn't have the.
Oh, she just destroys them, and then she says she completely nukes these guys. Like, and then she says, "Did you think your dad was the only Mandalorian?" And it's like, such a like, fuck it, that's the coolest shit ever. Like, really cool, man. I was like, yo, that's awesome. Like, yeah, because like we haven't really seen a lot of hyper competent fighters like this, and we were talking last time about how the other Mandalorians that we see just don't have it like this. Like, they just don't have these kind of skills. But Bo Katan, she fucking got it like this, and it's. I thought that was a really cool reminder of like, yeah, she is kind of his equal in a lot of sense, and maybe his superior in some other sense.
I should think she'd be way ahead of him, because he's like just a bounty hunter, but she was fighting in wars like against capable opponents. He's just going after like drunkards and stuff,
Yeah, it's a really really good line. Yeah, so then she and Matt, or she kind of fights this thing, and then. Is it Mando that kills it with a blaster shot? I can't remember how this ends.
No, because he's unconscious.
Yeah, I thought she sliced it with the Darksaber.
Okay. Yeah, and then he wakes up, and he. I might have missed this. I didn't rewind it because it was already really late when I was watching it last night. But she's saying that they're eating soup. Did she say pog soup?
Or is it something like that?
Yeah, P or Pog or something like that.
Isn't Pogs the little guys from The Last Jedi?
Those are Porgs.
Porgs. I've written down on my notes. I was so confused. I was like, are they eating like Porgs, the cute guys from The Last Jedi? Okay, so they're not. Okay, cool. Very confused. I was like, how did they survive the glassing of Mandalore? Like,
well, first of all, how did they even get here?
Yeah, it was very. I just had a moment where I was like, I'm glad I misheard. Because you shouldn't. Don't eat porgs. That's not cool. They're very very cute. Yeah, and yeah, as we said, Mando takes up the saber. We get. Wait, so what happens next? So they.
Well, before you get there, I want to say that I was left with this weird feeling of, well, why didn't they do this? And I think it was probably for the reasons what we've talked about before, but like when I was watching it, I kept thinking about like, oh, this is how she gets the saber, or this is how they get the saber to her, and Mando is okay with it because he gets disarmed. Like the Doctor Who thing, or the Dalek takes the takes the Darksaber off of him, and then
Yeah,
she gets
and
it
she
and
kills it,
fights
so
him.
now she owns
Yes.
it.
Yeah. So I'm like, well, he was disarmed, and she used it to like rescue him or whatever. So he should be like, he doesn't care about this thing. So he should be like, yeah, because, and I think you can kind of see that in the way that he picks it up, because he's just sort of like doesn't really think about it. Like, he just picks it up and like puts it away, and because it doesn't, I don't think it has the significance to him that it does to her. So I was like, well, why didn't they just, him being like, well, you rescued me, like, have the Darksaber. There you go. Everybody's happy. Yay. But no, they don't do that. And I was like, and that moment felt a little bit awkward to me. And I think that was probably intentional. But
Yeah.
I think probably because she has to go on this journey this season.
And this whole thing was focusing on his quest much more than her quest, even though they should have tied them both together. I mean, you're making the same argument I did, is that they didn't focus enough on her want in that moment.
But they also double beat it because he takes all of his gear off before he goes into the water. So it's there again in front of her.
Yeah, and she saves his life again at the very end of it. It's like she should have the sword twice. I mean,
this is my general complaint with this episode, or the point I was making earlier, is like there's a lot of double and triple beats of like the same thing, which I'm not against strictly, but that's kind of where it feels a bit like it's still structured like a video game, where it's like, okay, you did the mini boss. Okay, now here's the big boss room. Like it sort of has a bit of that cadence to it, in a way that I'm not criticizing. I found that noteworthy, I guess.
And also they did, was it this episode at the beginning before he gets out of the ship, where they established that they can pressurize the suits?
yeah, because at that point he lost R5, who got lost or kidnapped or whatever, and they don't know that there's not still contamination. So he pressurizes his helmet. You hear the thing, and he says something like, "I'm going to pressurize this. Get in your pod, so when I open the cockpit, you won't get poisoned because Grogu's in his little pod." So I guess that also explains the very end when he apparently pressurized his suit before he got sucked underwater, even though he didn't.
No, I don't think he pressurized the suit, which is why he was unconscious when she went down to get him.
Yeah, that was my reading of that as well.
Which begs the question of why didn't he pressurize his suit before he went to bathe in the waters of Mandalore?
Well, because he's not literally, he's just, it's a ceremonial bathing. He's not going for a swim. Also, is he
It would have been
now?
weird. Well, it would have been weird if he I was thinking about is he gonna like strip down with everything except like
yeah, he starts taking everything off.
I was like, are we gonna get sexy Pedro Pascal Jeff getting in the
not
water?
on
Like,
Disney Plus.
No,
if this was HBO maybe, but not on Disney.
If this
Plus.
was The Last of Us, you bet you're seeing Pedro Pascal's butt.
I wonder if anyone's done a comedy edit where he starts taking the stuff off and you hear the music go bow chicka wow wow.
No,
okay.
no. It would be like he goes to like take the thing off.
Do you think? Yeah, because you made this point earlier. So Bo Katan, I want to rewind slightly from that scene because there's a really interesting conversation they have when they're walking through the corridors, where she's kind of pointing stuff out, and she describes the outcome of the war like this. She says, "Our people are scattered like scars on the galaxy," and I just thought that was a really tremendous line. But she talks about, this is where she name drops Satine. So she's talking about the war and Satine and what all has happened and how they've all ended up where they are now. Darth, did you watch all of the Clone Wars? I can't remember. I don't think you have you?
No.
Fake fan.
I know. I'm in like season 2 or maybe 3.
Hand in your card.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't even think you like Star Wars, bro. Like,
Do you even Star Wars?
Yeah. I like this.
You
like,
said
the
you
one
stopped
thing.
at season 2?
Yeah.
Season 2 is when it gets good.
It was so getting good. Like, yeah, like I got through most of the cheesy stuff, and then
people, you got to fight through the first 2 seasons or just skip them.
Season 2 fucking whips. Anyway, the reason I bring up Clone Wars is casual, filthy casual. So Bo Katan is Satine's sister. Bo Katan is Satine's kid sister, just chronologically as well, because of ages and stuff. And so Satine, for those who haven't seen Clone Wars, I can't believe I know something about Star Wars. So Satine was the Queen of Mandalore, and before she was queen, her and Obi-Wan actually ran away together and eloped after he went to Mandalore on assignment, and they spent like a few years together doing stuff on Mandalore for the Jedi, but secretly just were in love, and you know, he eventually had to leave that relationship for various reasons because she became queen. Blah blah blah.
Because she died?
Allegedly, they were just good friends.
The sexual tension in the episode when he goes back to Mandalore
Palpable.
is
Palpable
to the point where it's like, y'all are really doing this in front of she makes all of the guards, not the guards, she makes everyone leave except the guards, and they are flirting so hard that I'm like, should I be looking away? Like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be here. But you know, you know, he has very complicated feelings about it. They get into a full-on yelling match because she gets into her cups at dinner. Because she doesn't know how to feel about him returning, and they have this big screaming match in the throne room in front of all these people, where it's very clear this is an argument that they had back when they were dating, that they're rehashing because she's had a few too many drinks. And it's just a really interesting dynamic because she's a pacifist, and Obi-Wan is at this point a general in a war, and he's saying to her like, "Hey, you need to toughen up because the Night Watch this is gonna be a problem. Like, you need to deal with this." And she cannot let go of the pacifism in order to step forward and lead. And Obi-Wan can't find the compromise with her, and so instead he ends up just going out there and doing his army thing, and trying to, you know, sort this out. And ultimately, is what ends up getting Satine killed. And so this is a really interesting name drop because if you hadn't watched the Clone Wars, this is just cool flavor text where you're like, "Ooh, I bet that'll be important later." But if you're a filthy casual, you haven't watched Clone Wars, you wouldn't know what this means. But I thought it was really interesting because one of my complaints about last season when we talked about it briefly is like, complaint is the wrong word. A thing I noted was it started to feel like Star Wars with a capital S and capital W in a way that, as I said last week, is just not my jam. I like this more because it's like, it's still Star Wars with a capital S and capital W, but it's like Star Wars on the periphery. Like, it's a real niche thing that happened in the cartoon that is like part of the lore of the world more than it is like a big, you know, event in the main chronology. Like, this has ostensibly nothing to do with the Skywalkers, but is a thing that is geopolitically important to the history of the galaxy. And so I just thought it was a really cool inclusion. And I got to sit there and be like, I recognize that reference for the first time in Star Wars ever. So I was very excited about that.
I understood that reference.
Yeah.
It was a real good, like, Granddad David understands the culture moment, which was good.
One of my friends from work sent me, or we were talking about or on Teams. She was like, what did you think of the episode or and everything? Oh, it was pretty good and everything. She was like, what'd you think of the Mythosaur? And I sent her back the GIF of Leo like pointing at the TV.
Yeah,
I sat up in my chair like, holy shit, it's a Mythosaur.
I have a million questions about the ending of this episode, which we have to get through in half an hour. So, okay. First of all, Satine stuff, really cool. I think that's going to be a really interesting conversation next episode about what they're going to do now. Because she had, Bo Katan has to confront the fact that, like, she's like, your religion's bogus. And then she literally meets, like, the thing their religion is about.
Yeah.
Cool. Really interesting maneuver. What is happening? So, they need to go down and bathe. He needs to go down and bathe in these waters to, like, get himself redeemed or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
and she reads that placard that's kind of like she quite sarcastically reads this placard, which she's
They
like,
have
"Oh, you
historical markers in Star Wars. I kind of lost it when I saw that. I was like, that's what Mom makes me stop every time we go on vacation. She's like, oh, there's a historical marker coming up. We got to stop.
54.
I mean, it's pretty good. Let me just pull up the text for that if I can. Placard text. Someone has written this down. I hope someone explains.
So you're not going to read it in the original Mandalorian?
I
don't think I was actually like listening to what she was saying. All I was hearing was the tone.
Right.
The sarcasm and
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see if they've detailed it here. Of course, they've just explained what it means. Just give me the quote. Oh my god. I know I don't want to create an account. I don't want to disable my ad blocker either.
It was something about like the history. This is where Mandalore, the founder of our culture, first tamed the mythical beast. Something along those lines.
It is. These motherfuckers haven't written it down. Whatever. We can't quote it because no one's written it down because no one's a real fan. So the mythosaur is its head skull thing is the skull that is the symbol of the Mandalorians. Like that's their like sports logo, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, that's obviously. Also, it's called a mythosaur. I don't blame her for being like, that shit obviously ain't real.
Yeah.
And so it lives in the. It's this big fucking thing. Like it surprised the shit out of me. I was like, I don't know what the hell is happening. In this giant kind of underground well. This is like a real kind of Lord of the Rings or Dark Souls maneuver. Like this is very fantasy to me. In the like, we dug the mines so deep that we uncovered the ancient, creature that dwells within, and now we have to boss fight it. It really has a lot of Dark Souls flavor, which I kind of loved. But what's happening? Is this something you guys knew about? Was this like a known quantity, or was this just surprising to you guys as it was to me?
I was surprised.
Yeah, I was blown away just from how cool it looked.
I was like, I don't think I was really thinking about like where are they going with the fact that like he disappears in the water. At first I thought like he was grabbed by something, and then she's like going down, and I'm like, well, where the hell did he go? And then she like sees him on the ground, and I'm like, okay, I'm not really sure where they're going with this. Actually, I wasn't thinking about it at all. I was like really caught up in the moment. And then she grabs him and picks him up, and then like there's like, oh, there's a fucking mythosaur, and it's just like, what was that? And then when they get out of the water, then I was like, oh, that's what this is. That's what we're doing here. That's what this is all about. And so I'm not really sure what your question was. I forget.
I was wondering if this was like a known quantity, like if this was a Star Wars thing, but it sounds like it isn't.
That like there was that mythosaurs are real, and not only real but still exist.
Like this.
Not that one, but I think we could have said yes, they existed, but we assumed they are extinct because, legends come from somewhere. So the original Mandalore probably did have some epic beast that he tamed and rode into battle and whatever. But whether that was the mythosaur, whether that was, what was passed down in legend as the mythosaur, all of those facts get distorted through time. So who knows what happens. So the fact that it ended up looking like what they expected and being as big as they expected or whatever is interesting. I was kind of in my head comparing it to the I don't remember what the name of the big tentacle creature was from Solo that was like living out in deep space.
The big whale thing.
Just the point being that there's a whole bunch of
name for that. What was that?
I feel like we had a bunch of different awesome names for it, but now I
can't remember. That was where David's brain broke because of the vacuum.
The vacuum of space, breathing vacuum.
What a tortured existence that film is.
Yeah. Well, the point of bringing it up was that they have introduced big old creatures that don't necessarily have a good history, but they're like cool and they fit the moment that they were trying to go for.
Yes.
I was kind of wondering how awake that thing was, because when it opened its eye, it looked like super sleepy. Like, why y'all waking me up kind of thing.
Oh, it's probably been chilling down there for forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was just napping, bro. Like, he's just fully chilling.
It's like, what?
Yeah.
Bruh.
He's like, huh? What? It's not even 6 a.m. yet. Can you leave me alone? Like,
Which
my alarm hasn't even gone off.
Like, from, I don't know if pacing is the right word, but the legitimacy of the scene, like, what made Mando go under so quickly? Because the assumption is that the beast grabbed him and drug him under. But if so, why did it look like it was just barely groggily waking up when Bo pulled him back up to the surface?
Yeah, so I was thinking about that because initially, like I said, when he goes under, your first or my first thought, and I'm assuming your first thought as well, was something grabbed him. And then when she's going down, 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 it's like and then he's just there. So clearly nothing grabbed him. He just fell. So I'm like, did he just step off a cliff and the Beskar just weighs like 8 billion tons and he doesn't have his jetpack on?
Yeah, that was my second guess.
That kind of makes sense. I don't know. Or it pulls him down and then hides.
Goes back to sleep? What?
Yeah. He's like, if I pretend I'm asleep, I'll be able to surprise me.
He's having a nightmare and he just reflexively like reaches out and accidentally like grabs Mando. It's like,
It's like a dog when they like start kicking in their sleep or whatever.
Yeah. It's gonna be curious when the next episode starts and like Mando actually explains what he felt, because like that thing's hand would be the size of a football field. So like, how did it grab him and drag him under but not kill him? There's so many.
I don't think the Mythosaur had anything to do with him going under the water.
It would make more sense that he just fell.
That's honestly pretty funny if that's the case. Like,
I think the more interesting thing is the well, yeah, that is kind of funny. But like the more interesting thing about that is he's gonna wake up and she's gonna be like, "There's a fucking Mythosaur down there," and he's gonna be like, "What?"
He's like, "Let me get my jetpack and go see." She's like, "No, what? No, don't do that."
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because he's gonna have to take her word for it, and she's the one that doesn't believe in it.
Right? Yeah, he's the believer and she's not. Yeah.
Hey, is Mando good? Maybe, I don't know. It could. Hey, is it trying to do something? Maybe.
Going back to the original objective of everything, like what? Mythosaur is a force user. Plausible explanation right there. What was I gonna say? Like going back to the original.
What you didn't see was Grogu do a force push, nudging Mando over the ledge.
Yeah, he's like just sitting there on the edge of the water, like
just attempted patricide, and no one caught it.
Yeah. It's like, I want her to be my new dad.
Yeah. Grogu like wielding the Darksaber, but so he's like he has bathed definitively in the living waters of Mandalore. What does he do now? Like, does he go like, all right, yeah, so you saw the Mythosaur and everything, that's cool. Well, I'm gonna go back to the nutbags now.
I don't know. Like, yeah, what next? What's the quest gonna be?
I don't know.
I don't know. I think it's yeah. I was really intrigued as well. I think you made a really good point, Ryan, which is like, I kind of assumed this entire season would be trying to get to the waters of Mandalore, but they just kind of did it.
Yeah.
And I like that.
I'm like, yeah, and it's like, what does Mando want? Like, and I think that's a really interesting like part of his character, I guess, across the seasons. Is like, season 1, he's very reactive to trying to protect Grogu. Season 2, he's trying to find Grogu like a home. But now it's like, well, now what? Like, now he kind of is like adrift, absent any motive. So it's like, is he going to help Bo Katan rebuild the Mandalorians?
Is he going to go back and be a sheriff?
Is he going to be a sheriff?
Yeah.
Is he going to become the Ubuntu Eve Classic champion pod racer that he's destined to be? Like, yeah, what would you guys want to see? Like, what do you think is like an interesting direction for the rest of the season?
Well, that's why I was saying that the part that it was most intriguing for me is the thing about Bo Katan. I feel like this season is going to be about him and her, or not him and her together, but like it's going to be mostly about him helping her with stuff.
Well, he does owe her twice over, and I could see him being like really dedicated to that, you know, paying that off.
Outside of that, I don't really know what his motivation is, because like if he wants to just go back to the nutbags, then he can do that. But like, where do you go from there? And do they reject him again? Or that's the first thing. And the second thing, like the only other motivation that I could think of is like him wanting Grogu to be a Mando. Which
he keeps saying that, which I don't know what that means. Like, does he want to put a helmet on Grogu? Like,
yeah, one of the cult.
Yeah,
right.
One of us.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know if I want to see that.
So that led me to an interesting thought of, you know, what does he want? And at the very beginning of this show, he already knew where his people were, but he wasn't part of them. He was off doing bounty hunter stuff. So he didn't want to be with them.
So, no, he couldn't be with them.
Why?
He was an apostate, remember?
At the very beginning of the entire series?
Oh, at the beginning? No. He was all the Mandos were there on Navarro. Yeah. In hiding.
But he wasn't part of them. He wasn't like living with them or anything. It seemed like he only associated them with when he like needed to, when he needed advice or something.
Well, yeah, but he was funneling all his money. Like he was like going out into the world making money for them so they could live, like, and survive.
So there's a little bit of a throwaway line that doesn't really track very well for me. But like they do throw that out there of like only one of us goes above ground at a time, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like everybody else stays hidden. So like, you know, keep it secret, keep it safe.
I guess all of that is me trying to backtrack his want and his need, like to the very beginning. What was he doing then? Was he trying to live with this group of people? If so, then he would still want that. If
trying
not,
to get by, man. Just one day at a time.
Yeah. I think literally like he needed to keep his people alive. Like he needed to survive. And then meeting Grogu, he suddenly had a different need and a different want. And I think his need is probably still the same. And I think that kind of folds in nicely to what Bo Katan wants, which is like to rebuild Mandalore.
Well, when we start with Mando, that's the status quo part of the story, right? Like you don't necessarily have to have a want in there.
Yeah.
He's just getting by. Mando was financing the culvert. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess the question then becomes like, even at a genre level, right? If this is still a Western, which it kind of is, like going into the mines and like finding some crazy shit, it's kind of Western. The question is like, what is the rest of the season settling the frontier being Mandalore? Like, is that the maneuver? I guess we'll find out, but it's a really weird place to kind of be in 2 episodes in.
Well, go ahead, Ryan.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I was going to say that there's so much talk, like literally, in the dialogue between Bo and him. Mostly it's just Bo kind of just talking and him just being quiet, about how the different factions were split up and everything. And if there's that much dialogue being dedicated to them being split up, then the logical conclusion to the series would be them getting back together. Combined with, there is so much about training little Yoda to be one of those people. Like the little dialogue about the pea soup or whatever that he had never had before, and he gives the half of it to the kid. You know, so he's like, I'm giving the kid the Mando soup, you know?
I have 2 things on that. The first one is that part of me thinks that all of the Mando or Grogu should be a Mando stuff that we've seen thus far was just to build that credibility for what happened in this episode. I will bet you $1 that will not be relevant anymore in the season. I won't go beyond $1 because I'm not
I
that.
was about to
Wait,
say,
an American dollar?
An American dollar, he did. Yeah,
Four
a
of mine,
Canadian
like-
dollar. That's how strongly I feel about it. A Canadian dollar.
Oh, damn.
So like a part of me thinks that all of that was just to build the credibility for this. And then the other thing I was thinking of was Darth and I think we're on the same wavelength there. And I was like, okay, where do they go from here? I think he needs to reconcile. He needs to get Bo Katan and the nutbags to reconcile somehow, because all of her people left and they're out there,
Yes.
whatever. And so the only group of Mandos that we know about are the nutbags.
True. We've still got two other things that have been set up. We've still got the pirates out there who
True.
have it in for Mando, and then we also have the Ezra stuff that we talked about last week. So there's something, and then you've also got Rosario Dawson's character out there trying to find Thrawn. So like there's kind of a lot of moving pieces that they could leverage here. I think they've got levers to pull on, is I guess what I'm saying.
So Kate makes a good point that everyone coming together would probably be because they have a common enemy, whether that's like the Empire or...
Yeah. Who would that be? The Empire, the Pirates.
Moff Gideon
Pirates
comes
makes
back.
sense.
I don't
Maybe
think
Thrawn?
pirates.
Thrawn?
I mean, at this
Maybe.
point, it could actually be the New Republic, right? Because currently they're in charge of everything, and they're trying to actually police the
Yeah, but
galaxy.
the New Republic's a joke, though.
I feel like that's blasphemy, but you might be right.
Wow.
That is a
I
quote.
didn't- That's a quote. I didn't realize Darth was all fucking anti-regulation over here. Free market capitalism, baby. That's the way of the future. It definitely hasn't destroyed the planet. Do you think? I guess I'm interested. If you're watching this, like, let us know in the chat there, like, what you want to see for the rest of the season, or what you think would be really cool. Something that I have been increasingly interested in with the introduction of the Mandalorian stuff is, I kind of wouldn't mind somehow working like the history of the Clone Wars and stuff a bit more into like whatever the plot ends up being. Like,
Yeah.
I'd be kind of interested if like we kind of learned a little bit more about like, okay, what all else was going on around in this galaxy in the system, the Mandalorian system, and what challenges is that going to present to resettling Mandalore.
Or even just having
'Cause I-
flashbacks like they did in the Obi series, where you see like him and younger Anakin doing some stuff
Yeah.
like
And
that.
they could justify a whole flashback episode.
Yep.
Is that something Mando's done before? I don't think it has.
No, but part of the issue there is that this would be kind of like throwing the Mando episodes in the middle of Book of Boba Fett. If like I would have to think it would be predominantly about Bo Katan.
Yeah, you have to do Bo-Katan or Satine. Like, it'd have to be about Mandalore, I think.
Yeah. But since I think that would be okay in this show, because like, you have the Book of Boba Fett, which is about Boba Fett. That's his show. And then right in the middle of that, you have 2 episodes that are not about him at all, from somebody who has their own show. Flashbacks can be pretty brutal for pacing. Yeah, so I agree with that. But that's why I'm saying, like, if you think about what am I thinking of? Maybe like episode 3 of Last of Us, where it's like the whole thing is technically in the past, right?
Yeah. There's a structural name for that. Can't fucking think of what it is. The most famous example is oh my god, what's it called? Wizard and Glass, where it's part of the Dark Tower series, and the entire book is a flashback. It's like 500,000 words, and the entire thing is a flashback. It's the best book in the series, by a fucking country mile. The Wheel of Time does it a lot as well. I think there's a real maneuver to doing it. I think flashbacks can be brutal for pacing if they're short enough. If they're long enough that they feel disruptive to the plot of what's happening in the episode, and not long enough to feel like their own actual story. Like, I think if you do, I agree, it would be weird. It would be the Boba Fett problem. Like, you'd be like, why is there an episode of Clone Wars in my Mandalorian show? But if it was an episode of Clone Wars about Mandalore that was directly relevant to what was happening, I could see them finding ways to smuggle that in.
Yeah.
I just don't know if Filoni's interested in doing that.
I think you're exactly right, because that is the problem with at least that first episode in the Book of Boba Fett, is that has nothing to do with the story of what's going on with Boba Fett. The second one does, because he goes to hang out with Boba Fett after that, but the first one has nothing to do with the Book of Boba Fett.
You know, depending on the location, they could also do something very much like Westworld, where the whole episode is back and forth between flashback and present day, but no one knows which, because the Mandalorians are all wearing armor. You never can really place who is who, unless you know their particular, color scheme or whatever, whatever skin that they've attached for that episode. Granted, it couldn't happen like on that planet, but on other planets it could. So depending on, I love looking at Westworld from the fact that flashbacks can be done in such a different way than you would normally expect them to be done.
That was such a fun show.
Yeah, it was really great. I think making a show that's 2 seasons is really smart.
Just petered out like a lawnmower out of gas or something.
What are you talking about? They only did one season at Westworld.
Yeah.
I heard they were trying to do a second season. I can't remember if it got funded or not.
Wait, was that a joke, Rye? Or was that are both of you joking?
There's only one season of Westworld.
Okay.
When the clockwork plots, and then you realize it's the crown, and then it stops the show. That's the show. They did it.
So I'm getting.
How many seasons are there really? There's like 6, right?
There's 4 now, I think.
Ooh.
I still haven't watched 2, and I've wanted to until now.
You don't need to. You've seen the whole show. You've seen the whole show.
Leave it on the shelf. It's good.
That's sad.
I remember when that came out, it was a game change. Like, that was like real
I had to
prestige.
tap out of Westworld. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Real prestige television.
I immediately rewatched the entire series. Like, I almost never do that with any media. I adored that.
Well, because it makes your brain go, what? And then when you rewatch it, you're like, oh my god, how did I see that? And then you rewatch it again, and you're like, oh my god, this is so clever. Like, it's fucking phenomenal.
That was the last show that I watched where I like actively participated in the online discourse, as the season was going on, because there were a lot of theory. Like people are smart. When you get like a large sample size of somebody's going to figure out what's really going on. And so like there was this camp of people like, oh, like the old guy, it's actually the young guy. Oh yeah. And then of course that reveal happened. It was still done really, really well, and the payoff was awesome. But yeah, so like when the second season came around, I was like, no, I don't want any part. I don't want to participate in the online discourse there, and I haven't for like regarding speculation or anything else for anything else since then.
Yeah, I just don't do it for TV and film and stuff. This is the closest I come, is like when we talk about it in these kinds of formats. But this is more the media crit thing than like the speculation thing, even though that's obviously intrinsically linked, with the notable exception of, since Dark Souls 2 came out, I've played those games as they come out and been involved in the discourse, not necessarily online, but with other people playing it. We're like on like Discord or Slack or whatever, we'll be playing through it together and like unraveling the obscure world and like what's all trying to work out what's happening together. And that's a really like rewarding exercise because of the nature of the kind of obscure way that they tell stories. It's really rewarding to do that. Part of why I didn't watch a lot of Star Wars for a long time, and why I've always kind of been kind of a fly on the wall as an observer and I kind of look at it like under a bug under a glass type thing. It's like, I think so much of the discourse around, particularly the sequel trilogy when they started coming out, it made it really hard to talk about without basically getting yelled at in any format. Like, I remember when our Force Awakens. I was going to say Force Begins. Seriously, guys, I don't know what's
Just episode 7, episode 8, episode 9.
Episode 7, the new one. We were
With
very
the
positive.
thing and the guy in the place.
The guy in the place with the lightsaber, you know, the one. We were very positive on it. And we got absolutely ripped to pieces by people being like, I can't believe you like this. You're fucking idiots. Like, you don't know anything about storytelling and shit. And then when we were like mildly critical of The Last Jedi, but generally positive, people were like, you guys are fucking cowards. You're fucking too woke. You're, you know, Disney, you're paying. It's like, well,
were people
make
saying
up
woke
your
back
mind.
then?
Yeah, people were, yeah. Apparently we were like part of the SJW propaganda or some shit. You know how it is.
I knew it.
Internet people.
I always do it.
What got broke off. Oh wait, is that? Oh, Disney's the biggest company in the world making media. Oh, okay. Also, for those of you who say shit like that, Disney shit isn't even that progressive. Like, come the fuck on. Go watch some French cinema and then come back to me and tell me go work, go broke. Like, what are we doing? But I guess my point there is like, I think it's really interesting to think about the online discourse as a function of passing text. I've been talking about this a lot lately with my friend James, who I do the advisory with, where I think most people now consume media quite passively. Like, I'm talking about the majority of people, where it's a passive experience where they're dual screening, sometimes triple screening or whatever. And it's just kind of noise that they're vaguely consuming. Mm-hmm. And so I think what you end up with is concentrations of people online who are very passionate about the thing and really, you know, think about it a lot, and kind of use that framework of, well, I'm a blanky blank fan. They kind of use that to then smuggle in, you know, not intentionally, but like whatever their existing biases are or whatever. Like when I read a text, I'm always like looking for like, hey, you know, is there like cool, interesting stories? Is there cool, interesting representation here? What are they trying to achieve? What's the storytelling mechanism? Someone else comes to it and they go, you know, where's my old Star Wars stuff? Where's the lightsabers and the Force and stuff? And then other people come and look for different things. I think I think that stratification of environments where you guys talk about this a lot, where there's like certain Reddits where it's like, if you hate the new Star Wars, this is the Reddit for you. Or if you like queer Star Wars, this is the Reddit for you, whatever. I think that stratification is why I just completely tapped out of all that stuff for anything except Dark Souls, because that's such a niche and nerdy community already that it's a pretty safe environment, because everyone just loves themselves a weird little freak in a Dark Souls game. No one is like, oh, what's the bloody, that character's a lesbian, they're trying to propagandize your kids. Like, no one's doing that shit. Because it's fantasy nerds talking about fantasy bullshit. Yeah, I definitely tapped out of like everything after The Last Jedi. I think I just went, I'm not talking about this stuff anymore, and not being involved in the discourse.
Okay.
Fun. Hey, bright note to end on. Really
week.
brought us down there.
Yeah, I like need a drink now. I mean,
hey, at least we got I got fun space western cowboy Mandalorian. So I'm happy. All right.
I'm very interested to see where we go in the next episode.
Did y'all know they were putting out trailers for these things?
Putting out what?
There's a trailer for episode 3 out.
I'm not gonna watch it.
Yeah, I don't want to.
They reused like a ton of footage from the first 2 episodes, but there's a few clips from episode 3 that kind of give a hint.
I don't want to see.
Okay, well, I guess we'll see. Yeah, I want to go in fresh. Yeah.
That's the other thing. Like, so speaking of participating in like the online discourse and like speculation and stuff, I learned that from my Star Wars buddy, because we wouldn't just go watch Star Wars. We would go to see like all the Marvel stuff as well, and he would not look at trailers. He would not like talk to people about it or whatever. Like he went in blind.
Yep, that's my friend.
So I was like, I think that's the way to consume this stuff. So that's what I started doing, and yeah, like I went in to watch the Rise of Skywalker, and I was like, that's interesting. Palpatine's back? What the fuck?
Wish I watched the trailer, because then I wouldn't have gone to the cinema. Got him. Yeah, I always do like.
Wish I played Fortnite.
We should play Fortnite instead.
No, if I
that's
had played
right.
Fortnite, I would have
You
known that
would have
Palpatine
known.
was back.
Man, the end of the world is a lot weirder than I thought it would be. Like, I wasn't expecting Fortnite to be such a like strong cultural proponent. Because I often will do the first teaser trailer or something, and if I'm interested in it, then I'm like, cool, I'll go see that. I don't need to consume anything else. I do remember very vividly growing up when Skyrim was going to come out, consuming, because I loved Oblivion, and I hated Fallout 3, and I was like, Skyrim could be good because it's a fantasy. Like, I didn't like Fallout 3 because they made it into a fantasy more than a sci-fi, and it may as well not have been a Fallout, except for the fact that it had the aesthetics of Fallout. But that's a whole different 4-hour rant. But with the Skyrim stuff, me and my friends literally consumed every morsel of information that came out about it, like leaked, people recording on their shitty 2010 cell phone, 240p recording of a projector in a media room of someone playing it, right? Like, and we consumed it. We were so excited, and then it came out, and it was exactly the kind of game that Bethesda would have made, and it was great. But then the older I've gotten, the more I'm like, if I hadn't consumed as much content, I probably wouldn't have committed myself to playing as much of the game as I did, and I probably would have had a better experience because I just invested too much time into it.
Yeah,
like it was just so consuming. Also,
Skyrim?
Wet Water Drop with the OG opinion: Oblivion, Morrowind, Skyrim. That's contentious.
That's a strong statement. Oblivion greater than
That's-
Morrowind.
Who's not putting Morrowind first? That's
Full disclosure, I've never played Morrowind, but like, I used to talk about it with my boss back in the day, and he was always like, Morrowind is the best one. Blah, 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 blah.
It is, yeah. I mean, obviously the best Fallout is Fallout 2. It's Fallout 2, Fallout Tactics, best Fallout is Fallout New Vegas. So it's Fallout New Vegas, Fallout 2, Fallout Tactics, Fallout 3, Fallout 4.
And if they made New Vegas with a better engine and some stellar graphics, that would be the shit.
There's some kids remaking it in the Fallout 4 engine, which I don't think is a particularly interesting engine, but at least it'll be nicer, I guess.
Yeah, gameplay and quests, Oblivion, 100%. Skyrim, it would be the world.
Yeah.
If you could put the gameplay and quests of Oblivion in the Skyrim world, that would have been amazing.
Someone's also doing that. It's like,
well,
people
when
are
I
just
when
doing
I
this
I
for
don't
fun.
I don't mean graphically. I mean like in Skyrim when you were wandering around, like you had that joke of I think we made that joke last time of like you go. I'm like, I need to go over here to do this quest, and you pick up like 10 quests along the way. Like you can't swing a dead cat in Skyrim without hitting something interesting happening, either randomly or a quest or like a little bit of they did a lot of that little visual storytelling of something happened here, and or there might be like a little journal or just like a pile of rocks with like an arrow in it or something like that. But they wouldn't give you anything other than that, and there was like lots of little Easter eggs like that all over the world. Oblivion, you could fast travel between all the cities of the right. This is not about Star Wars anymore, but like Oblivion, you could fast travel between all the cities right at the beginning of the game because there was nothing going on in between the cities.
Yeah. And even just visually, it was quiet. They were really struggling against the constraints of like the systems they were working on, I think.
But I will, when my boss would, because I think I was right in the middle of playing Fallout 3 when I got hired at that job, and he was like, oh, you play games too? And I was like, yeah. And it was like, yeah, I've heard of Fallout 3. It's like Oblivion with guns or something like that. And he's like, oh, Oblivion, it's not as good as Morrowind, but it's still really good. And he went on about this quest where you get sucked into a painting. Do you remember that one?
Yes. I always get that confused with the Painted World and Dark Souls, but yeah.
There was so much good stuff in that one. And his favorite one actually was not that, but he was like, yeah, the one you like. You get drunk and then you're like killing all these goblins and then you wake up and the goblins were people, and yeah, it was such a good game.
It's a fucking tremendous game. Yeah, I mean my point about like thinking about the stuff and thinking about genre and stuff. Also, Basil says Fallout New Vegas can be modded to the gills. Looks 10 times better than Fallout 4. Fallout 4 can also be modded. my Fallout 3 is so heavily modded, it looks better than Crysis.
Have y'all seen that Skyrim has been modded for the Oculus Quest for VR?
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. That'd be trippy as fuck.
I
Yeah,
bought
you meet the Macbot, that's right.
I bought one of those games. It was one of the Elder Scroll games, and I played it for like an hour. And that was my only exposure to these kind of games where it's just such an open world, because mainly I'm doing like Destiny type stuff where it says it's open world and it's totally not. It's like really locked off as to how much you can explore and how much there actually is content wise. Like I went to one town in this Elder Scroll game, and like one corner of one town, and I was like, this is too much. Like if I keep playing, this is my jam, and I will lose my entire identity to these type of games, because I will want to look at every rock in every village, because that's the kind of person I am.
Yeah,
Well-
and that's what I did for like 1,000 hours. Like, it's crazy.
All right. I have the ultimate combination of this. So like what I want to see is who are the guys that made who made New Vegas? Obsidian. I want to see an Obsidian story in a Skyrim like world that is built by Ubisoft. Because have you played Assassin's Creed
Brandon.
Odyssey?
Yeah.
That was like 2019. That was like my game of the year, because there was a part in there where a friend of mine like watched me, like I was like streaming it over Discord, and she watched me play like the whole game. She was like more wrapped up in it than I was. But like there's a part where like you're going through like Athens, and the quest is like a kilometer away, and it feels like it's a kilometer away. Like you're running through a kilometer of city, whereas every town / city in like Oblivion or Skyrim is like a couple shacks and a wall, you know?
Yeah.
So if you had that combination of like the Obsidian story with like the Skyrim depth of stuff to do in the world, and then built by Ubisoft, that would be the shit. My
Yeah,
computer
I mean,
would melt.
I was gonna say, how would you run it? Yeah, it's. I mean, that does sound delightful, to be honest. Although I kind of like, I mean, that's sort of like Baldur's Gate. The series is like kind of like that. Obviously, they're not actually games, the tactics games, but you know, I guess my point earlier was like, Skyrim is fantasy, and Bethesda made Fallout as a fantasy. Like Fallout 3 is a fantasy game that is styled like it's a sci-fi game. And so Fallout 4 is even more so. You know, there's all these proper nouns and things like that for like guns, and like everything is like this kind of like a big melodramatic version of itself. And I kind of think like my point earlier about like Fallout 3, that's just like say New Vegas, which is like objectively sci-fi, it's kind of like my issue with like Star Wars has done the Bethesda thing of like taking their sci-fi and then making it into fantasy, and it's kind of like I don't know, I think it's a taste thing. I still enjoy it, but that's kind of why like perhaps a lot of people prefer the original trilogy and maybe even the prequels a bit more than the new stuff. Is like they feel a lot more resonant with what we would consider to be sci-fi, and like the stylings of it. Like it's sort of when we talked before about things feeling real and like the little details that they throw into the Mandalorian and stuff, it's a lot more of that, where it feels like this big unwieldy thing that you can never fully understand, and people have different beliefs about it and different opinions about it. It kind of feels like in new Star Wars, it's like everyone kind of has the same opinions about everything. I'm talking broadly, like the sequel trilogy. Like everyone kind of has the same opinions about stuff that's sort of informed by like an arch plot, rather than like actually having different feelings about stuff. Like everyone who works for the bad guys thinks the same way. Everyone who works for the good guys thinks the same way. It's just whether they're brash or not. I don't know. I just think it's really interesting how that change has occurred slowly, especially given the roots as a Western, right? Like, you know, the spaghetti Western style aesthetic is explicitly tied into the Dying Earth sci-fi genre. And they've just sort of slowly walked further and further toward the fantasy. And it's kind of like I finished Fallout 4, and I think it's one of the worst worlds, like least interesting stories that Bethesda have done. And it's because doesn't really have anything to say about the stuff that's in it, and that's sometimes a real function of changing the genre in that way. I don't know where I was going with that, other than like.
Well, I commend you first for bringing it back around to Star Wars, which is what we're actually supposed to be talking about.
Look, I do what I can.
One interesting thought that I had about what you were just talking about of the aesthetic and how it used to be a Western and everything was thinking about Firefly and how much that felt like a Western throughout the entire thing. And it's like that aesthetic never changed, but maybe they didn't have enough time because it got canceled way too early. But Star Wars has kind of shifted. And is that good or not? Like, should it have stayed the way it was originally intended? Or is it fine for such a long-running franchise to grow and it went through this fantasy change and then it went into sci-fi, and next it may go into some neo experimental phase,
maybe cyberpunk. Well, yeah. I mean, Rye was kind of talking about that last week, right? Like that you could tell really interesting different genre stories within the universe, but they have to be motivated stories. Like they have to be interesting to be in, and like have to the genre has to be chosen in such a way that it feels necessary for that thing, instead of just like what Bethesda do, which is like, I don't know, we know how to make this kind of style of story, so we'll just put whatever layer on top, we'll put whatever facade on top of it, and it doesn't matter. And I think that's the issue. Like it, sometimes it doesn't feel motivated. Like Boba Fett, like it is a fantasy, and it should have been a Western. Like it looks like a Western, but it just really isn't. And I think that's where it can get tricky, is like if it's unmotivated or it isn't related to the plot they're trying to tell.
I don't know that you could really define Boba Fett. Like to me, if I had to define it, I would say it was a mess.
Boom! Got him! Fatality. Yeah. Just really out here doing him like that. God damn.
But as to what Darth was saying, I think we talked about this last week. I think it would be fine to do that sort of like different sort of genre in Star Wars, in the Star Wars universe. Like if I think that works especially well in the medium of television, where you can kind of like compartmentalize things. Like Andor can be its own thing and have its own feel, and you don't have to watch it. But if you do, and it's like it may not be Star Wars, and that's okay. And it works really well. But like you said, it would be a story that worked outside of the Star Wars universe, you know. It just happens to be placed in the Star Wars universe, which adds that extra little something to it.
It's kind of the whole show of Clone Wars, is them just like trying different genre of stuff within the universe, right? Like one episode will be like a spy thriller. The next episode will be like a fucking weird philosophical meditation. The next episode will be like a 3-episode coming of age story. Like it's a real show where they just like throw all these things out there and see what works. This is kind of like, this is why I think a lot of people didn't like Rings of Power, is it's fantasy with a capital F. Like it's high fantasy. And I think a lot of fantasy that we've seen since Lord of the Rings, while emblematic and recreating the aesthetics, a lot of the fantasy that we've seen since, particularly if you think of like the big tentpole things like Game of Thrones, it's a very specific style of fantasy where it's interpersonal drama, it's political thriller that looks like fantasy. And like it's like war stories that looks like fantasy, right? It's like a Steve Pressfield book, but it's actually got dragons or fucking whatever. And so I think that's why a lot of people didn't like Rings of Power, because it's the most high fantasy ass it made me it reminded me of reading fantasy books from the 60s and 70s when I was in high school. Like it has that big melodrama to it. Everyone talks like this and they're very stilted, and it's very like everything is like epigrams and these big kind of sweeping, everything is the kind of cranked to 12.
Very British.
I think that's very British, yeah. Which I fuck with. I love it. I was like, I thought it was incredible. But I also recognize it's completely my bullshit as well.
Did you liked Rings of Power?
I had a great time. I had so much fun.
I very much enjoyed Rings of Power.
Yeah, made me feel like I was a fucking 12-year-old again. I was like, this is my shit. I love Lord of the Rings. Like, it was so much fun. I loved those books growing up, and the films as well. And coming back to that, I just thought it was a real treat. Yeah, I'm a real Lord of the Rings head. Like, I played all the games. I played all the good games that have come out. Like, I've read the Silmarillion a few times, even though I don't understand most of it.
I was about to say, how could you get through it?
So much metaphor.
It's like
and
reading
shit.
a dictionary. I mean,
I haven't seen season 2 of The Witcher. Have y'all delved into that?
Yeah, Darth and I have talked about that before. I think. I think it's bad, but I loved every second of it. Like,
I understand exactly what you mean.
yeah.
I don't know, because I've read the books as well, and like, just the changes they made to Geralt, I think it just really, I don't know, they've made him a big himbo, which is funny, but in the books he's kind of this like weird himbo philosopher. In the show they've just kind of lost some of that nuance, I think. But I loved it. I every second of it, I was like, just I love being in this world. I love these characters. I thought it was fantastic, but apparently it's bad.
Season 2 was awesome. There you go.
There you go. Kate's on my side. Every writer I know, like whenever I get asked about that, if I'm in like a professional writing setting, I have to be like, oh, yeah, I haven't really formulated a complete opinion on that yet. It's like, if you're like, oh yeah, I loved it. Other people are like, did we watch the same show?
I am not like 100% like a fan of having to qualify or having to put a quality on something and before stating whether or not I liked it. Like the example that I always use is I take a lot of heat from my friends about my affinity or my appreciation of the movie Hardball with Keanu Reeves, and it is I it's not a great movie, but I love that movie. It is It hits me.
Yeah.
Like when I mean, I'm not recommending anybody go watch it, but like
I got I got one that's even worse. The Harley Quinn Birds of Prey.
Oh, that's a terrible
It was so bad, but I enjoyed it all the way through. I was entertained. I was just like, this is a just stupid movie, and it was entertaining, and I liked it. But I will get hate, and people will unsubscribe. They're like,
that's the first time anyone's ever used the syllable "I liked" and Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey in the same sentence, unless it was prefixed by "didn't."
Yeah,
yeah, that's crazy. But that's I agree, right? I think it is crazy that we have to preface stuff, but that's also part of what this is, right? Is that like we don't get to be normal people that just are like, I enjoyed blanky blank. It's like I have to give you a fucking thesis about why I liked it.
Well,
which I love.
No, I don't think that's what I'm getting at. I think what I'm getting at is having to, in order to preemptively defend your appreciation of something by stating how bad it is.
Yeah.
Like, or that you acknowledge I acknowledge that this thing is not good, but I still like it.
Yeah.
And
like self-effacing.
Yeah.
Like self-deflammatory. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, I don't know. Maybe because I do that, and I do mean it. Like it's not a good movie, Hardball, but it hits me in all the right places. Or it at the time that I watched it, it did. Right. I haven't watched it in a long time for probably a good reason.
But I think we also just do that as a natural deflection because we know what's about to come, and we could save like 10 minutes of arguing just by saying like, I know that this is not good. If we're talking about a technical analysis, yes,
this movie is not good. I understand this movie then.
Yeah. I mean, like that also, it's just a function of like being a personal line. Like,
read what he just wrote.
I would never throw in a Darth YouTube channel joke at this point. That's good. It's good. It's very good. I mean, me going, I know this is bad, but I loved it, also stops the 10 emails that I used to get every fucking time I mentioned it on my old show. Like, that's also just a function of like, I don't want to get those fucking emails. Mm-hmm. That's also part of it too. Yeah, I don't know. I just think it's a really interesting like situation to be in where there is so much media being created that and so much of it being consumed passively that finding the good stuff is really hard. And I think just being okay with liking something absent its quality is fine. But also, it's what leads to people liking trash art that gets commercialized and becomes successful, and then just becomes like the kind of basic medium art that people consume. And then people over time, unless the education system is doing its job, which, like, you guys live in America, you tell me, like, it's pretty bad here too. Unless you're getting taught, or being exposed to tools of like literary criticism or like, media criticism and things like that, it's easy to let the standard kind of just go by the wayside, and we don't appreciate cool indie shit, or we don't appreciate, things that are taking risks, because the safe stuff is what gets popular because it's going to appeal to the most number of people. Which is fine.
Not just that, but the safe stuff is what's getting made.
Yeah.
Have you all seen what is it called? Sword and Bone?
No.
Blood and Bone? Sword and Bone? I think it's on Netflix.
It's the one with like the super darkness that they can't go
into.
Yeah,
the dark fog or whatever.
Yeah,
like,
it's on my watch list because the trailer the trailer was so cool.
The trailer was very cool, and that's why I started to watch it, but I'm like 2 or 3 episodes in, and it's not doing it for me. Like I can't really pinpoint like there's anything wrong with it. I'm just like, I'm not that interested. And it seems like exactly the kind of show that I would be into.
The style of this whole fantasy thing just looked so cool. But like the most frequent thing that we say is like the idea was great, but the execution sucked.
Yeah. Which is unfortunate. I mean, that could be said about, most of my relationships with my exes as well. Kate Does Nature says, yeah, that's why I don't consume Marvel or DC. Yeah, exactly. You gotta watch the Batman though. Oh my god, you gotta watch the Batman. That's like such a good fucking movie.
Wait, you liked that?
Oh my god, it's like, I think it might be like the best film I've seen since fucking Moneyball. Like it's like, it is the best. I think it's like the best Batman film by a fucking country mile. It's so good.
All right, well, I'm gonna have to watch that now.
It's so good.
And I'm gonna message you like, why did you make me watch this shit?
You have to be which Batman? The Batman, the new one. But it has to be your bullshit. Like, it is a grungy 90s action flick. It's moody and weird and like metaphorical and slow and like philosophical. Oh my, it's so good. But it has to be your shit. It's either the best film you've ever seen, or you'll hate every second of it.
So is it closer to was it Nolan that made Dark Knight?
Yeah,
it's closest to the Dark Knight, but it's not. Is
it closer to that, or is it closer to what's his name, the new Joker? Or is it like a cross between, or is like somewhere in the middle?
I would say it's a blend of both, but it's pulling more on the levers of like, I think structurally it's definitely pulling on the levers that Nolan did. I think narratively it's probably more in lockstep with something like the Joker, perhaps, where it's very kind of deeply interior and weird and dark and like just strange. Like, it just takes a bunch of risks that, like, I think if it's not for you, then it's like, I don't know, it's a noir thriller. It's like fucking Heat. Like, if you like, 80s and 90s noir films and weird shit like that, you'll love it. Like, that's
the Batman is more like 7. That's interesting. And also, Kate is 100%. I will get on that train. Henry Cavill's there. I'm there for it.
Yep.
Yeah, he's kind of a babe. I was just scrolling through Netflix, like looking at the weird films that I've watched. Do you guys remember when Guy Ritchie did a King Arthur film?
Yes, and I loved it, and it was bad.
It's so bad, but I loved every second. I was like, I mean, I love everything Guy Ritchie's ever done, even the bad stuff.
There was a movie I saw the other day that I wanted to talk to you about. It was shit. I don't remember what it was, but it was like, it was trying to be a Guy Ritchie film, and it was not working. And I don't remember what that was. I'm gonna have to go through my history. It was a recent movie. No, yes, it was Bullet Train.
Yes, I saw the trailer and I was like, this looks like a Guy Ritchie flick.
And I thought it was a Guy Ritchie film, but it wasn't working. And then I looked it up and I'm like, oh, that wasn't Guy Ritchie. That's why it wasn't working.
Yeah, didn't have the special sauce, don't got it like that. Yeah. what's that guy's name? Robert Pattinson. It's the Twilight guy. Yeah, that's my
Twilight dirty boy.
recommendation. Is like, if who's the big sad boy? It's me. No, the big sad boy from the 90s. It's me.
Bullet Train was fun, but it wasn't good.
Okay. Is it good enough to like? Is it interesting enough to watch or no? What do you think?
It's interesting enough to watch while you're doing something else.
Wait, was that the heist one or something else?
The heist one.
It's semi-recent. There's like a briefcase everyone's fighting over.
Yeah, that's that one.
It is.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know, man. I
would not devote an evening to it. It's the perfect movie to watch while doing something else.
You know what my friend told me the other day, and I cannot believe this. I'm sorry to put you on blast like this, but we were talking about The Last of Us, and I was explaining because as a media crit now, because I do this stuff for fun, and I no longer have to worry about it like being an income. I usually lavish myself when I watch something. So every Monday night when The Last of Us is available in Australia, I sit down, I pour myself a beer, I put my feet up, and I put it on the big TV, and I thrive off of it. You know, I'm just having a lavish time. When I watched Mando last night, I put my feet up, I made myself an old fashioned. I sat there and I enjoyed myself. I had a little bowl of chippies. I was just delightful. And I was talking to my friend the other week because we were talking about The Last of Us because she's watching it and she's not a gamer. She's not really like a nerd or anything like that. And she's absolutely loving it. And she keeps talking to me about each episode because she knows that I've been making content about it for 10 fucking years for some reason. And I was explaining to her, I was like, oh, but you guys don't own a TV. Like, what do you do? She goes, I just watch it while I'm working. And I was like, sorry, what? She's like, I just watch it while I'm working. And I'm like, Lucy, you don't have a second screen. She was like, I just screen it. So it's in like the bottom right while I like write up case notes or whatever. So and I was like, what? Like, I was just picturing. My brain was like, I can't process this. And then she's so funny. She's like, yeah, that's how I was watching it. And then episode 3 happened, and I put it on full screen, and then openly wept. And ever since, I've had to like not do anything else while I watch it.
Yes, 100% that. Yes,
very funny to me. Old-fashioned is an old man cocktail. Yes, Kate, I'm the oldest man there ever. Listen, I'm fucking granddad over here, right? You know me. I'm always yelling about the kids on my lawn and shit.
Yeah, damn kids with their mumble rap.
Damn kids. Look, is that all? We could keep talking for hours, but I feel like it's getting late.
I'm about to say we've gone on to like 18 other franchise at this point. I mean,
we stopped talking about Mando like an hour ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, I had to yell about fucking Fallout. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, I really want to talk about Batman now, because I also adored that movie. I think I may have immediately rewatched it or wanted to immediately rewatch it, and that's usually my level of qualifying how good a piece of media is how quickly I will reconsume it, and there have only been a very, very small handful of things that I immediately rewatched, and that was one of them that I immediately wanted to rewatch.
I liked it so much that I went back to the theater to watch it again because I was like, I need to experience this in the cinema. And then the second it came out on streaming, Australia is it's impossible to get good content here. Like even today in fucking 2023. So I had to buy the Ultra HD version on YouTube of all places. And the second it came out, I bought it and watched it. Like, it's just such a good film.
And I don't know if anyone will agree with this, but when I think the first time I remember this happening was Pirates of the Caribbean #2, Dead Man's Chest. We watched it in the theater, and then all of us agreed and snuck into another theater to see it again a second time, which we are the most like straight-laced group of people. So the fact that I actually stuck into a movie was like, and then.
You did a crime?
I did a
Pirates
crime.
Of the Caribbean 2?
Yes.
You did a crime.
Bro.
But statute of limitations, that was like 20 years ago or whatever, so now I'm safe. So I could talk about it. But yeah, that was the first one where I was like, I have to see this again immediately. And at some point I realized that's how really good content is just you immediately rewatch it.
Yeah. Speaking of another cinematic universe that's gone off the rails.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Oh, Pirates! I thought you were gonna segue. You were talking about Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was like, yes, and
Batman films in order of awasomeness to mediocre. Batman
Okay.
Begins, The Dark Knight, The
Sneaking into
Batman.
movies is so 1982.
that is a hot take, Basil. I mean, I really like Batman Begins, but
Yeah.
some people think The Dark Knight is the best film ever made, and you're
Yeah.
out here being like, actually, The Batman Begins.
It probably depends, and this is an argument I want to make with you all the time when we're talking about The Last Jedi, because when you're talking about something that's part of a franchise, do you view it as its own contained story, or as how that story fits within the other stories? So he could say that Batman is the best, or the first one, Batman Begins, is such a great story because it builds such a good foundation, and The Dark Knight maybe doesn't have as good, as maybe it's not a good middle movie. But then maybe you're looking at it and you're like, as a self-contained movie, which is how I view things, it was fantastic.
The Dark Knight is an 8. Wow.
An 8, wow. Batman is
That's a-
7.5.
That is a strong opinion.
Yeah, Basil really out here with the hot take. The Dark Knight
Betrays Batman's character.
betrays him. He's not a real person, Wet Drop. You can't betray a character.
Whoa. This is a thing where we talk about Star Wars and you're talking about you can't betray a character?
They're not real people. Text is a constructed object. It's a phenomenal object in time and space. You can't betray a character. Sorry, everybody.
We
I'm
talked
gonna raid comment in all your videos.
we talked
Let
about
me
that
say-
a
let me
lot in
say-
our Sherlock
Yeah.
series, where he was like, people are inferring all of these things about the characters, and it's literally just the writers making the characters say what the writers want them to say. So
Oh, he's
Yeah.
real.
let me summarize doing a master's in literature for you. Things are made by people, and characters aren't real people. I saved you about 30 grand in educational fees in a degree that I very rarely use.
Grabbing my
pitchfork. We should end it there before Darth next we talk about The Last Jedi. Because that will get me thrown off this channel.
Tune in next time. Same Darth channel, same Darth time, where David's
Still a
going to
good
talk
show.
about why character assassination is not a thing.
because they
I'll
were
bring
never people in the
sources.
first place.
Yeah. Can't assassinate a character if they were never real.
Any opinions on Henry Cavill's Warhammer 40,000 movie coming? I will see it.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I mean, he's a big dork, so I think he'll do a good job.
I don't even know
Um,
anything about that series, and I want to see it because it just looks sick.
Also, before we go, I do need to know. I was taking the piss, but why does the Dark Knight betray Batman's character? I do need some context on this.
He's like, I can't leave until.
I need to know, frankly. It's been so funny finishing the Sherlock book and going back through all of our episodes because, like, watching you over time, Darth, go from someone who's like has a pretty good understanding of like the whole idea of how text works and like storytelling, and then going through and watching you follow my kind of journey of like kind of all the research and stuff, and by the end of it, I think I just like fully.
That's not the Dark Knight. That's Batman Begins.
Batman goes out of his way to save everyone, and he just lets Ra's al Ghul. Yeah, that's Batman Begins, not the Dark Knight. And also, that's the point. He says that he's like, I don't have to. He's like, I won't kill you, but I don't have to save you, which is sort of like him staking a philosophy, and that's like his character. That's his arc. It wasn't good enough for you. Yeah, he does do that, Basil. I think Waterdrop is thinking of Batman Begins, possibly. So what team is it? Yeah. Also, the action stuff in the Batman is so good. Like just the choreography and the sound design. Oh my god, it's like the sound design is so good. Like it's just the moodiest, most atmospheric. It's so cool. I love that film. I could talk about that film for literally fucking hours.
The cinematography was beautiful because it was really subdued. Like it didn't have like a bunch of fancy camera stuff that I remember. I seem to remember it being like a whole lot of just like wide shots and just like still
Yeah.
cameras and stuff, and you're just like Batman just walks through the room and just watch him do his stuff, and it was a whole lot more detective stuff. It kind of reminded me more of like the animated series from the 90s where he actually has to solve a crime and not just beat people up.
Yeah, it's very much a noir detective story in that sense. And yeah, I mean, it's very restrained in what it does with its cinematography. They shot it on like really old, beat up lenses, and like it feels dirty and kind of like I don't know, like Gotham just feels like a real place that would suck to live in. It's kind of like the general vibe.
I mean, I think the Joker gives you more of that vibe.
Yeah,
That movie
I
was
guess that's true.
haunting. I mean, I loved it, but oh, talk about needing a drink when you finish a movie.
Which movie?
Joker.
Oh,
Is that what
yeah.
was that what it's called?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a movie that somebody asked me about that. I was like, that's the kind of movie that I feel is worth watching once.
Yeah, unfortunately for the Joker, I've seen Taxi Driver. So when I went into the theater and I was like, oh, they're just doing that again. Like I still had a great time. But I just thought it was unfortunate because I was like, well, this isn't Scorsese, so it's already missing something. I still thought it was brilliant. Yeah, so it's a good film.
All right. Good stuff. 2 hours.
stuff.
We're right on the mark.
Of our hour and a half recording session.
Yeah.
We did it again.
And y'all were pushing for an hour before. Remember that?
I do not remember agreeing to that.
We never agreed to it, but we talked about it at one
Hey,
point.
we could have done an hour if we had just talked about Mando.
But we
That's
can't.
true.
Because we only did talk about Mando for an hour.
That's a good point. But then how we trying to yeah, how we trying to like talk about this is the problem. I think this is why Darth always blames me for this, which I'm not copying the heat, by the way. I still refuse to take the blame. Is that
I will start timing you. I will get a literal stopwatch and time your words.
At work, we have this recording software which like records all your Zoom calls, and it like tells you like your longest monologue and like how much of the call, like the percentage of the call that you speak or whatever.
So what's your record?
Mine is. Yeah, let's just say that the automated AI feedback is like, you probably should let the other person talk a little bit. It's very funny. Yeah, but I think that's it. We might be back same time next week, episode 3. Is that right?
Yep.
So join us then. Make sure you consume the episode. Before then, I'm dead keen to see what they do with the like just what's the maneuver.
Basil wants us to go for another 4 hours.
Oh my
I
God,
don't know. Tune in next week. We'll talk about Mando for a few minutes and then we'll veer off into something else.
Some other bullshit. Some other weird opinion that we have about stuff that, unless you're like, if you're under the age of 30, you're like, I don't really understand half of what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But hey, that's what we do, baby. Out here alienating the kids.
It goes both ways. We don't understand them either. So
That's true. Yeah, it's you know what? It's mutually exclusive. We get it.
In my work group that like goes out for like drinks and stuff like that, there is a standing rule that any time that I use a word that the kids use, like what is it, like cap or dead ass or ratchet or any word like that, like everybody has to take a drink. If I use it, but if I use it correctly, which I'm not.
Yeah. I often try and do it and then do it wrong, but I've now started doing it wrong on purpose just to fuck with my intern, and it drives him mental. It's a very good game. You just sort of like in the complete incorrect context, you're like, oh man, that's so base. And he'll be like, that's not how you use it.
Based. I forgot about based.
I just want to know what kind of work atmosphere that Rye has, where they're just doing shots every day while people are using incorrect syntax.
Yeah, go out for beers.
The one that I can't get on board with is bet.
Yeah,
I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. It was like, yeah, blah 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 blah. Ah, bet.
it's like
what?
agreeing, but it's not really.
It's like short for you bet. I'm like, just say you bet, or better yet, don't say anything at all. Just get back to work.
I mean, I've used it all the time, but in like the literal "I will take that bet" kind of fashion.
Yeah, but that's like probably like playing Russian roulette with your gun friends or something. Like, it's literally a bet, you know, like.
I keep feeling like I need to send you some like video of America that's not this wasteland that you're always like describing.
Well, I know it's not all that, but the fact that it's some of that is the point. It's good stuff. Okay, let's get the fuck out of here. Shout out to
everybody.
Basil. Shout out to Kate. Shout out to everyone in the chat. It was good fun hanging out. We'll be back
Wet
next
water drop with the strong opinions.
week. Water drop with the hot Batman opinions. We love to see him. It's good shit.